when thinking about where to do the next book, it not only made sense in terms of our family's history, but it made perfect sense in terms of all that Portugal has to offer. It was a no-brainer. So I started traveling in 2021, right after the pandemic and all the restrictions lifted, and spent the next 3 years traveling quite extensively across Portugal and photographing and researching and interviewing and all of that good stuff. So,
Amazing.
yeah. Hi, my name is Christine Chitness. I am an author, journalist, and photographer, and my new book, Patterns of Portugal, just came out. And I'm excited to be the latest guest on Portugal, the Simple Life podcast. I talked to Dylan about why I love Portugal, why I decided to write a book about Portugal, and all of the wonderful things I discovered along the way.
Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, the Simple Life. And I'm really delighted to be joined by Christine Chitness. Christine, bon dia for you. Good morning. Thank you for being on the podcast. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. So you're sitting whereabouts in the US right now?
Yes, I am in Rhode Island. So this tiny little state over on the East Coast, and full of wonderful Portuguese people too. We have a very big Portuguese population here and in Massachusetts. So that's where I am.
I've seen a lot of your publications on Instagram and a lot of events with like Portuguese food, Portuguese wine. Looks amazing.
Yes. This is the highest concentration of Portuguese people outside of Portugal in the U.S. is here in the southeast New England, so Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
Wow.
And many from the Azores. So, came over for the whaling and the fishing industry and have stayed and thrived and have very robust communities. So we have Portuguese markets and restaurants, and it's kind of little Portugal over here.
Amazing. Christine, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I'm a journalist, author, and a photographer. I write for a wide variety of publications and mainly focus on travel journalism. So I write for anyone from the New York Times, Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure. I love finding interesting stories told from a different point of view. I write a lot about women in travel, textiles, artisans, history, culture. I love doing it through a visual lens too, hence the photography. So often I'm writing and shooting a story at the same time. Just this year, just a few months ago, my second book came out called Patterns of Portugal. My first book came out in 2020 that was called Patterns of India. And we'll get into, I'm sure, why that's the case, why India and then why Portugal. And I'm sure some of your listeners can guess who know their history. But anyway, Patterns of Portugal came out in February of this year. And it's just been a thrilling ride to see it out in the world and see people connecting with it. It's been really interesting because so many people who are connecting with it are Portuguese, and then others have just traveled to Portugal and instantly fallen in love. So it seems to have two very distinct audiences: those that have been there as a tourist and loved it, and then those that are from Portugal and are so proud of the history there.
Let's jump to the next one where you talked about the other important factor in writing a book was the colors, the textures, the patterns. Tell us a bit about what you've discovered here and what's excited you.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things I love is, when most people, when you talk about Portugal, the first thing the tile buildings, right? And the tiles, and they want to talk about all the tiles, and it's become something really synonymous with Portugal, but actually has its roots in Moorish and Islamic influences, right? And so I think what's so fascinating, I always tell people when you land in Lisbon, the first thing you should do is go to the National Tile Museum, because it roots you in the history of the country and how the country truly is a melting pot visually of its history, all the battles that were fought and won, all of the influences that came in and were defeated and left. And it's all playing out right there in front of you in terms of the architecture and the visuals. And so that's always my suggestion when friends go. I said, your first stop should be the National Tile Museum. Not only is it stunning and beautiful, but you're going to understand and better appreciate what you're seeing in terms of the tiles. And so, yes, the tiles are beautiful, but I'm almost just as interested in what it tells us about the country's history. And then from there, I would just say, I think that the color palette of what I think of as the color palette of Portugal, it's just there's a Mediterranean feel. You have these blues and these whites and the traditional homes. You have kind of the sunny Algarve region that's just, lush and beautiful and coastal. And then you get into the north and it's a little bit moodier with the dark greens, and it's reflected in the, old world and kind of romantic feel of Porto. And so that was really fun for me, is to kind of trace those color stories and see how they relate throughout the country, but also change as you go from region to region. One of my favorite places to photograph is the Alentejo region. I find the light there. I mean, as photographers, we're always talking about the light, but the light in Alentejo is this golden, beautiful light, and it kind of dances off the olive groves and it's just it's my favorite region in Portugal.
Okay.
And I think I could wander with my camera there just for like the rest of my life and be and be happy. But I think it's so stunning from a visual point of view. And then you stumble across these little towns that are medieval towns, up on a hill somewhere. And it really kind of just feels like when I travel there, it's usually in the off season. I'm sometimes the only one wandering through a town and photographing. And there's something really, really magical about it.
Looking for a home in Portugal? This break in Portugal, the Simple Life podcast, is brought to you by Dylan and his team of certified realtors at Portugal Realty. Portugal Realty offers the exclusive Simple Life home buyer program. Visit portugalrealty.com today and book your free call to find out more. Welcome to the Simple Life.
But how did that all start? This affair, this journey with you and Portugal?
So my husband is from India, and his mother was from Goa. And as you know, Goa was a colony of Portugal for quite a long time. And so when I was writing my first book, Patterns of India, we did a lot of family research and really looked into the history of his family, which led us to discover that he actually has a Portuguese lineage. So at some point there was a marriage, and we think it was his great-grandfather, a marriage between a Portuguese man and an Indian woman. So my mother-in-law's last name was Coutinho. And so she was, she was a Catholic Indian woman with a Portuguese last name. And so, when I started learning more about his family history and really, I was fascinated. And I think Portugal's history is deeply entwined with its colonial past. And so starting to kind of understand how the Portuguese influenced India, but also brought back a lot of inspiration to Portugal. And so as someone who loves, again, photography, architecture, the textiles, all of that, I was really curious to see kind of how all of the influences from around the world played out in Portugal. And so that really led to that second book. My first book did very well. I was excited and had the chance to write a second book, and it was a no-brainer for me. The formula is kind of, it has to be a place that tourists are going. It has to be a place with a really rich visual appeal, which Portugal has. And it has to be a place that has a really interesting history, which Portugal also has. And so when thinking about where to do the next book, it not only made sense in terms of our family's history, but it made perfect sense in terms of all that Portugal has to offer. It was a no-brainer. So I started traveling in 2021, right after the pandemic and all the restrictions lifted, and spent the next 3 years traveling quite extensively across Portugal and photographing and researching and interviewing and all of that good stuff. So,
Amazing.
Yeah.
But what do you think is bringing people to this place, to this small little corner of the world?
So you have all these incredible wine regions. You have the coastline, obviously, which is a huge draw. I can't even think of I can't think of another country, in my opinion, that offers so much. And then if you are someone who loves history, you're going into towns where you can still see Roman and Moorish, architectural sites, which are just right there to walk by, and I find that to be just incredible, especially coming from a newer country like America. We just don't have things like that here. And then you have a really rich artisan history as well. I mean, I love going into Corval and seeing all the pottery being made. I love seeing the basket weaving, the text, the embroidery, the weaving. So I just can't think of there's nothing that Portugal doesn't offer. So no matter what kind of traveler you are, there's something to welcome you to Portugal. So I think for me, when I think about what makes Portugal so unique in terms of its history, is really that the way that they both preserve history and honor history and seamlessly merge it into the present and the modern day. And I think that example in Lisbon for me is always like, in so many places you'd have whiplash going from 16th century to, this new and modern, but in Portugal, you're just like, somehow it all feels right and makes sense.
Feels
And
good. Yeah.
it just adds to the ambiance, if anything. And I think that really is, I mean, Europe does that so well, but Portugal, there's something unique and special about the way they do that.
How about the food? How was your experience of the food? Again, differs
Oh my
from
God.
region to region. There's history behind the food, even there's history behind why we name drinks the way we name them. But how was your experience of
There's
the
a
food?
history behind everything, and then there's a pronunciation of everything, which I was like, oh my God. I mean, I find the Portuguese language so difficult, but again, I don't have an ear for language, so I'll be honest, but I feel like, say that again. The food's incredible. I mean, I think, it's similar to our conversation that we were having before, kind of talking about accidental sustainability. Like Portugal is like the accidental, like farm to table, model that they just do it because that's how it's always been, but now it's on trend, right? Like now it's all farm to table. In Portugal, it's always been either, sea to table or farm to table. Everything is just locally made. I mean, whether it's the cheese on the table, it's the farmer's cheese, whether it's the wine that you're drinking that's from the same estate, whether it's, the pork that's, the Alentejo pork. Everything is farm to table without it being some kind of marketing campaign or fuss. It's just naturally how they eat. It's what's available there. And if you're by the coast, you're going to eat more seafood. And if you're inland, you're going to have more pork and beef. And it feels right depending on what region you're in, because it's so rooted in the sense of place.
What do you want to say about your experience of the Portuguese people?
Well, I always say that this book could never have been made without the collaborative effort of everyone I met along the way. I felt like everywhere I went, people were incredibly open and they were incredibly generous with their time and willing to help me shape my experience to be the most kind of authentic it could be. I mean, I hate that word because what does authentic mean? But I think they really helped steer me away from maybe like tourist traps or like, okay, don't go there, you should go here. Or like, oh, did you know about this kind of like hidden gem? I felt like it's really gratifying for me to hear from people now how much my book feels really rooted in the kind of realness of Portugal. It's not, people are saying this doesn't just feel like a tourist guide to Portugal. And I think that is because of the people I met along the way. I'm not Portuguese, like I don't speak Portuguese. So because of the people I met, because of how they shaped my itinerary, that's kind of how the book was able to really be rooted in kind of the truth of what it is to be Portuguese. And I just give so much credit to whether it was where I was staying and it was like a hotel owner, or I stayed a lot of kind of homesteads. And so the homeowners would be like, come on, I'll take you on an adventure. They'd take me all over on a day, or I'd be eating with their family at night and hearing their stories and their family history. I was very much welcomed into people's homes and very much guided by their love of their country. There's a lot of pride. Portuguese have a lot of pride in their country in a really beautiful way. And so they were very eager and happy to share that. I almost just felt like a conduit to their stories. Like it's not my story. The book is not my story. I'm really was hoping and hope that that's reflected, but to be, yes, a conduit to the stories that people have who've lived there for generations and have a lot of pride in their country.
But Christine, what's one thing that you would like people to remember and take away from our conversation?
Well, I think that it's encouraging people who visit to remember that they're visiting, and to really honor the fact that this is the country where people are living and making their lives. Like, we're not just here to be tourists. I think going in with that openness to learn about Portugal from their perspective is really important, because over tourism can really ruin a country. And right, when people just come and all they want to do is like drink on the beach and they don't care about where they are or where they're going, or that's kind of when a country can really fall prey to over tourism. So when people are going to visit, who am I to say go for the right reasons? That's not what I'm saying, but go with a respect for, I think, for what Portugal is and for what the people there are about. It will change and shift your perspective if you go with that kind of openness to learn and a humbleness to really just experience Portugal from their point of view and ask questions, engage with people. I think, I tease my kids because I sound like an old lady now, but I'm like, look up from your phones and have a conversation. Like, I'm not afraid to eat alone. I'm always eating alone because I travel alone a lot for work. Those are some of the best conversations, like sitting alone, having lunch, and then talking to the person next to you, or having a coffee alone and talking. And some of the richest moments in the book came from that. And so I always, when I'm traveling with my kids, I'm like, okay, we're going to like engage in conversations with the people who live here to just honor them and find out more about their lives. And I think that can only make your experience richer. And so I guess, I really do. I feel not protective because, again, it's not my place to feel protective, but I don't want to see Portugal fall prey to that over tourism, people coming who, they're not rooted in that curiosity and respect for the country. So
yeah, I like
that.
Is
that okay to say?
Yeah, all good. Perfect.
Okay.
How can people follow you online, and how can we get your book?
Sure, I appreciate you asking that. So the book, if you're outside of Portugal, if you're in the UK or the US, it's available on wherever books are sold, on Amazon, also from small booksellers. In Portugal, it's available at quite a few stores now. I'm hearing throughout Lisbon and Porto especially. I'm trying to get a better distribution as well. Some people have had luck ordering it online. And then you can follow me. I'm on Instagram, probably too much, but it's at Christine.Chitness. And I share a lot there about my travels and about the book and not just Portugal, but really wherever my travels take me. And it's a great place if you do want to connect with me. I'm always kind of in my DMs. I'm happy to answer questions and connect with people there. So yeah, thank you.
Christine, a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
The people. I think really there's no Portugal without the Portuguese people and their openness, their hospitality, their warmth. Yeah, that's Portugal for me is the people I met there.
Wonderful. I've loved this conversation, Christine. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to holding your book. And for now, I'm going to let you call it.
Well, thank you so much. That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guests, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal The Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to The Simple Life.